Americans have a terrifying amount of confidence and entirely too much disposable income. When you mix unchecked ego with a complete lack of basic logic, you don't get innovation. You get adults losing their life savings to prove the earth is flat. Here are 50 of the most spectacularly stupid wagers ever made on US soil, proving that common sense is absolutely dead. 1. $50,000 is a lot of cash to burn just to find out you slept through middle school science. A wildly confident flat earther from Kansas actually bet a commercial airline pilot his entire life savings to prove the globe wasn't shaped like a dinner plate. The pilot didn't argue or break out a textbook. He simply printed off the GPS tracking logs from a routine trans-Pacific flight and handed them over with his bank routing number. The check cleared immediately. For the price of a luxury SUV, one man finally learned that gravity and satellite navigation apply to him too. That pilot essentially doubled his net worth by doing his daily job. 2. Physics honestly could not care less about your childhood nostalgia. A fully grown adult looked at a muddy creek and confidently wagered he could clear it on a toddler-sized bicycle. He got a furious running start, pedaled like a maniac, and achieved a glorious 24 inches of vertical air. At the absolute apex of his jump, the tiny metal frame violently snapped in half, immediately ending his stuntman career. He plummeted directly face first into the absolute deepest, thickest sludge the creek had to offer. His only reward for this architectural disaster was a massive mouthful of swamp water and a publicly destroyed ego. 3. Family holidays are basically psychological warfare, but two fiercely competitive sisters decided to raise the stakes. They bet on who could stay completely silent the longest during a chaotic dinner, with the loser doomed to wash every single greasy dish in the house. The passive-aggressive glaring was going brilliantly until one sister's toddler decided the living room wall was a perfect canvas for a permanent black marker. She instantly broke her vow with a scream so blood-curdling the neighbors literally came over to check for bodies. She managed to save her drywall, but she spent the rest of the evening elbow-deep in gravy-stained silverware. 4. Pet owners live in a beautiful state of complete delusion. One woman was absolutely certain her cat possessed genius-level intellect and bet her brother she could train the animal to fetch a cold beer from the refrigerator. After an exhausting week of high-intensity treat bribery, the big moment arrived. The feline actually managed to wedge its paw in and yank the heavy door open. But instead of grabbing a beverage, this furry prodigy maliciously swatted a full carton of eggs onto the floor and immediately went to sleep on a bag of iceberg lettuce. She lost the bet, ruined breakfast, and still had to get her own drink. 5. Nothing empties a wallet quite like the sheer arrogance of a self-proclaimed poker mastermind. This guy actually bet his buddies $1,000 that he could successfully bluff the table, holding the absolute worst starting hand in the game, a 7 and a 2 offsuit. He pushed all his chips into the center with the smug swagger of a Las Vegas high roller. The fatal flaw in his brilliant plan? The guy sitting directly across from him was quietly holding 4 aces. He called the all-in bet without a flicker of emotion. The absolute dead silence that washed over that room cost $1,000, and it was worth every penny. 6. Turning a simple traffic stop into a federal incident is a special kind of stupid. A self-taught legal scholar from Arizona bet his friend he could get his speeding ticket completely thrown out of court. His bulletproof strategy was arguing that the gold fringe on the American flag meant the room was operating under maritime law, because obviously a dusty desert town is governed by the rules of the high seas. The judge was entirely immune to this man's internet law degree. He didn't just uphold the original fine, he slapped the guy with a heavy contempt charge for wasting government time. He literally paid a premium just to sound ridiculous. 7. Arrogance combined with cheap alcohol is a truly magnificent recipe for disaster. A guy named Bill bet his entire, highly curated wine cellar that he could perfectly identify a vintage Bordeaux purely by inhaling its aroma. His opponent, a heavily certified sommelier, maliciously poured him a glass of $2 gas station Merlot. Bill swirled the glass like a true aristocrat, took a deep sniff, and confidently announced it was a 1982 Chateau Margaux. The devastating reveal was instantaneous. In a single, pretentious sniff, Bill handed over thousands of dollars of premium wine to a guy who essentially beat him with alcoholic grape juice. 8. Local politics will make rational people do highly irrational things. A guy in Portland was so unconditionally certain his favorite mayoral candidate would win that he made a catastrophic wager. If his guy lost, he legally had to change his first name to the winner's name for a full calendar year. The election results rolled in, and his candidate was crushed. The new mayor's name: Balthazar Bumble. For 365 agonizing days, a grown adult had to look his boss, his bank teller, and his incredibly disappointed parents in the eye and introduce himself as Balthazar. Neighborhood rivalries are definitely not worth destroying your identity at the DMV. 9. Corporate America is an incredibly dangerous place to test out your amateur comedy routine. A junior accountant bet his cubicle nemesis, his premium corner desk, that he could make their notoriously ruthless chief executive officer laugh out loud during a serious quarterly financial presentation. When it was his turn to speak, he delivered a joke so painfully awkward and deeply unfunny that the room temperature practically dropped below freezing. The CEO didn't crack a smile. He actually stopped the entire meeting to genuinely ask if the young man was experiencing a medical emergency. He somehow kept his job, but he's permanently exiled to a desk facing the supply closet. 10. Fantasy sports have the unique ability to completely ruin a man's life. One office worker was so obnoxiously confident his digital football squad would win the championship that he bet a coworker a permanent bodily modification. If he lost, he promised to get a tattoo of the coworker's face on his arm. Monday night rolled around, a kicker missed a field goal, and he lost the entire season by one agonizing point. Now, every time he wears a short-sleeved shirt at the beach, he has to explain why the deeply average smiling face of Dave from accounting is permanently etched into his bicep. Dave thinks it's hilarious. 11. There is a very distinct line between bravery and intentionally turning your digestive tract into an active volcano. A guy challenged his friends at a local restaurant, betting he could finish a massive bowl of their absolute spiciest soup without touching a single drop of water. The loser had to pay the massive dinner bill for all 6 people. He managed 3 bites before his body initiated a complete shutdown. He was sweating so heavily that the moisture dripped down and completely short-circuited his expensive smartphone sitting on the table. He collapsed in a whimpering puddle of chili-induced regret, buying everyone dinner and needing a new phone. 12. When a fire department officially lists the cause of a blaze as competitive stupidity, you know someone achieved true greatness. 2 suburban dads entered into a bitter rivalry to see who could engineer the most devastating backyard potato cannon. One of these brilliant innovators decided standard air pressure was for amateurs and filled his plastic pipe with highly flammable hairspray. He flicked the igniter, fully expecting to launch a russet potato into the stratosphere. Instead, he basically manufactured a pipe bomb. The massive explosion instantly vaporized his creation, completely blew his heavy wooden garage door off its hinges, and definitively lost him the bet. 13. Never underestimate the persistence of a squirrel, and never over-engineer a highly simple problem. 2 roommates down in Austin waged war over who could build the ultimate, unbeatable, squirrel-proof bird feeder. The first guy spent 3 weeks designing a high-tech, laser-guided, motion-activated water turret. His buddy simply took a huge jar of cheap baking grease and heavily slathered it all over a metal mounting pole. The expensive defense system was completely outsmarted by a rodent in 20 minutes, while the greased pole sent the little thieves sliding down like a furry fire department. The laser genius had to pay the entire electric bill in utter defeat. 14. The modern art world is a bizarre place, but even they have a breaking point for absolute nonsense. A minimalist painter made a wager with a snooty gallery owner that he could successfully sell an entirely untouched blank canvas. He slapped the profound title "Void" on it and demanded $10,000. The canvas sat on the wall for weeks untouched. Finally, an overnight janitor completely mistook the masterpiece for a spare rag and used it to aggressively mop up a massive puddle of spilled coffee. Ironically, the dark brown stain made the piece look significantly better, but it still never found a buyer. 15. If you really want to test the absolute limits of human sanity, try putting together a solid white puzzle. Two buddies made a massive bet on who could assemble a 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle with zero picture on it. The loser was required to aggressively promote the other guy's highly annoying political views on social media for an entire month. One friend threw in the towel after 72 hours of staring at identical cardboard shapes, realizing his brain was melting. Now, he spends his evenings furiously typing out opinions he fundamentally despises, heavily confusing his family and destroying his digital footprint over blank cardboard. 16. Nothing screams romantic desperation quite like blowing a whole paycheck on a deeply uncomfortable public spectacle. A guy in New Jersey was raging after a bad breakup and bet his ex-girlfriend's new man that he could easily win her back. He hired a professional barbershop quartet to stand outside her office window and belt out cheesy love songs. It wasn't charming, it was just incredibly loud and wildly inappropriate for a Tuesday afternoon. She absolutely did not come running back into his arms. Instead, she called building security to have the singers forcibly removed, while the new boyfriend texted him a lovely selfie of their steak dinner. 17. When the absolute penalty for losing a wager is a full-back tattoo chosen by your buddy, you better be biologically prepared to win. This guy confidently bet he could devour a grotesque 72-ounce slab of beef faster than his friend. He didn't just lose. His body completely rebelled. Halfway through the challenge, he turned ghostly pale and developed a medical anomaly his doctor cheerfully referred to as acute meat sweats. He surrendered, violently ill. True to the cruel contract, he marched into a parlor the next month and now proudly sports a massive, highly detailed tattoo of Jar Jar Binks across his shoulder blades. 18. If you ever needed absolute proof that society is entirely doomed, just look at street performers. Two rival musicians bet on who could pull in the most cash during a one-hour shift on a busy tourist sidewalk. The first guy brought out his expensive violin and played breathtaking, complex classical sonatas. The second guy held a cheap plastic recorder and blasted the melody of the Baby Shark song on an infinite, agonizing loop. The results were sickening. People were tossing $5 bills at the Baby Shark guy by the handful, entirely just to bribe him to stop playing. Psychological warfare is incredibly profitable. 19. Taking your historical education directly from a Broadway musical is a wildly dangerous game. A massive fan of Hamilton was screaming at a college history major, absolutely convinced the play was gospel truth. He got so heated that he bet a rare, autographed biography against the student's entire textbook fund that Alexander Hamilton was an American president. The history major didn't even raise his voice. He simply pulled his smartphone out, loaded the official White House website, and scrolled through the actual list of commanders-in-chief. The musical fan watched his prized possessions slip away, learning that singing and dancing do not constitute a constitutional mandate. 20. Men will literally use anything as a cooking appliance if you challenge their culinary manhood. Sal, a grease-covered mechanic, bet his snobby brother-in-law an expensive Michelin-star dinner that he could cook a superior ribeye using the searing heat of a running car engine. He wrapped the beef in foil, jammed it near the exhaust manifold of a Chevy, and took it for a hard drive down the interstate. The unboxing was a total disaster. The steak came out looking like a charcoal briquette, smelling heavily of unleaded gasoline and tasting exactly like used motor oil. Sal paid for the fancy dinner in absolute shame. 21. Viral internet videos make wild animals look adorable, but actual nature hits much harder. A guy in Tennessee watched entirely too many clips of cute raccoons and bet a buddy his prized vintage guitar that he could domesticate a wild one within a month. He left premium food out and cracked a window to welcome his new furry best friend. Not only did the raccoon completely reject his friendship, but it also invited 3 of its closest relatives to move directly into the guy's attic. They chewed through the electrical wiring, destroyed the expensive insulation, and forced him to write a massive check to an exterminator. 22. Pure nostalgia will make you firmly believe your physical body is 20 years younger than it actually is. Stan, a retired physical education teacher pushing 65, bet his younger son-in-law that he could still conquer the massive climbing rope hanging in the local high school gym. He chalked up his hands, grabbed on, and miraculously managed to haul himself exactly halfway to the ceiling. At that exact moment, every single muscle in his arms simply clocked out for the day. He couldn't go up, and he was too terrified to slide down. He dangled there like a sad piñata until the school janitor finally brought a ladder. 23. There is a very specific kind of mental illness among guys who aggressively modify cheap economy cars. A guy in Houston seriously believed his noisy, custom-tuned Honda Civic had the raw pulling power of a heavy-duty diesel truck. He actually bet the legal title of his car that he could tow his neighbor's massive 24-foot ocean fishing boat right off its trailer. He hooked up a heavy chain, revved the engine until it screamed, and dumped the clutch. The Civic's transmission made a horrifying crunching noise before puking a massive cloud of oily black smoke all over the driveway. He basically destroyed his own vehicle for nothing. 24. Carnival games are mathematically designed by absolute criminals to steal your cash, but some folks just refuse to accept reality. A guy walking around a summer fair pointed at a huge stuffed bear and arrogantly bet his girlfriend he could win it for her in under 10 throws. He slapped a $20 bill on the counter, then another. Over $100 and a staggering 150 plastic rings later, he was sweating, intensely angry, and completely empty-handed. His girlfriend simply stood there shaking her head, finally pointing out a tiny cardboard sign that clearly stated, "The rings do not fit over the glass bottles." 25. Nothing tests the absolute limits of a marriage quite like flat-pack furniture from Sweden. An overly confident husband in Ohio bet his heavily pregnant wife that he could assemble an entire wooden bedroom set in under 2 hours without ever glancing at the instruction manual. If he succeeded, he got to name their unborn son Maverick. If he failed, she got to buy a golden retriever. 3 agonizing hours later, he was sitting on the floor, surrounded by backward wooden panels and splintered particle board, literally crying tears of sheer frustration. They brought home a beautiful puppy the very next week, and the dog is named Maverick. 26. Die-hard sports fans make the absolute worst life decisions when their team is having a mildly good season. A wildly arrogant Atlanta Falcons fan bet his entire friend group that his team was destined for pure greatness. To prove his unyielding loyalty, he went to a parlor a full week before the big game and got a massive Super Bowl champions tattoo permanently inked on his skin. The Falcons then suffered the most humiliating, soul-crushing collapse in modern sports history, blowing a massive lead. Now, this poor guy has to walk around the rest of his natural life with a huge, uneditable monument to his own spectacular impatience. 27. Buying a vehicle the size of a military tank absolutely does not mean you possess the spatial awareness to drive it. A guy who just financed a monstrous, heavy-duty pickup truck bet his friends $20 he could easily parallel park it in a tiny downtown space meant for a compact sedan. He threw it in reverse and began a horrific 15-minute ballet of grinding metal. It took him 27 individual adjustments just to get close to the curb. In the process, he heavily scraped the paint off 2 parked cars and completely flattened a city fire hydrant. That $20 bet cost him thousands in property damage. 28. Mixing high altitudes, pure adrenaline, and absolute stupidity is a highly lethal combination. A guy out in Colorado looked down an incredibly steep, black diamond ski slope and bet his buddies a single case of cheap beer that he could ski it entirely backward while wearing a blindfold. He pushed off the icy edge and immediately lost any semblance of physical control. He didn't just crash. He became a human bowling ball, violently taking out 5 innocent skiers in a tangled mess of broken poles and winter jackets. He earned a lifetime ban from the resort on the spot, completely ruining his vacation for terrible beer. 29. Anyone who firmly believes coffee is just a simple morning beverage has never tried to quit it suddenly. A woman up in Seattle confidently bet her husband an expensive weekend getaway that she could drop caffeine cold turkey for a full 30 days. By day 3, the intense withdrawal symptoms turned her into an absolute monster. Her headache was practically apocalyptic, and her mood was so aggressively hostile that her husband was genuinely afraid to speak to her. The tension broke when she slammed $500 onto the kitchen counter, demanding he let her out of the bet so she could immediately go buy an iced latte. 30. You should never, ever challenge a trained professional with culinary information you found on a random internet blog. A woman arrogantly bet her sister, an actual working pastry chef, that she could easily win a blue ribbon at the local county fair using a bizarre cake recipe. The supposedly magical secret ingredient was an entire cup of warm mayonnaise. She baked it and proudly served it to the esteemed local judges. The reactions were incredibly grim. One judge politely called the texture curiously tangy, while another literally wrote on the official scorecard that the dessert was a profound insult to both cake and mankind. 31. Apartment complexes are absolutely terrible places to test your amateur athletic abilities. One guy staring down at his complex's swimming pool bet his roommate he could easily clear the gap from their second-story balcony directly into the deep end. He vaulted over the metal railing like an action hero and instantly realized he had dramatically miscalculated the basic physics of gravity. He completely missed the water and slammed directly into a dense, heavily thorned rose bush the landlord had just planted. He survived, but he spent the entire afternoon having his buddy extract sharp thorns out of his backside with heavy tweezers. 32. Homeownership has a weird way of turning ordinary men into dangerously overconfident handymen. Chet from Cleveland noticed a heavy leak in a basement water pipe and bet his actual licensed plumber that he could fix the issue permanently using nothing but heavy-duty waterproof tape. He wrapped the metal tight and proudly watched the dripping stop. He felt like a total genius until 3 in the morning. The city water pressure finally blew the tape right off, instantly flooding his entire finished basement with inches of dirty sludge. What should have been a simple $200 repair bill miraculously transformed into a $20,000 disaster zone. 33. The internet produces financial experts out of thin air, and they almost always lose all their money. A wannabe cryptocurrency tycoon in Miami actually bet his skeptical buddy 10,000 real dollars that Dogecoin, a digital token literally based on an old internet meme, would completely replace the United States dollar as the global reserve currency. The friend gladly shook his hand. Unsurprisingly, the global economy did not collapse in favor of a digital dog. Just a few months later, the coin's value plummeted straight into the dirt. Our financial visionary had to withdraw government-issued greenbacks and hand over 10 grand to his much smarter friend. 34. Video game streamers will endure unimaginable psychological torture just for a little bit of internet clout. A guy known online as Blademaster X bet his entire live audience that he could defeat the brutally difficult final boss of a popular game using only a cheap plastic toy fishing rod as a controller. 8 excruciating hours later, his character had been repeatedly pulverized, and the live chat was laughing hysterically at his pure misery. The sheer humiliation finally broke his spirit. He violently smashed the plastic rod against his desk, completely rage-quit the game, and permanently deleted his entire channel right there on the spot. 35. Watching 30 minutes of a glossy home renovation show does not instantly make you a certified structural engineer. A renter in Brooklyn bet his roommate his entire security deposit that he could dramatically open up their cramped living room by aggressively tearing down a dividing wall himself. Armed with a heavy sledgehammer, he smashed the plaster to pieces. There was only one massive problem. It was a crucial load-bearing wall. Within 10 minutes, the ceiling started making terrifying cracking sounds and sagging visibly in the middle. They had to evacuate the building, and the landlord hit him with a bill that practically bankrupted his entire life. 36. We are all hopelessly addicted to our glowing screens, and trying to prove otherwise usually ends in tragedy. A group of buddies threw down $100 each in a hardcore bet to see who could go the absolute longest without looking at their smartphone. Fast forward 12 hours, and the last guy standing triumphantly declared himself the ultimate winner, happily collecting a massive pile of cash. His glorious victory lap was cut incredibly short when he finally unlocked his screen and realized he had missed 17 panicked phone calls from his wife. The main pipe had burst, and their entire basement was currently underwater. 37. If the afterlife actually possessed the winning lotto numbers, ghosts would be living in significantly nicer houses. A deeply superstitious woman named Sharon bet her heavily skeptical husband $1,000 that her vintage Ouija board could act as a direct hotline to the spirit realm and predict the multi-million-dollar drawing. She confidently bought a ticket with the exact digits the little wooden triangle pointed to. When the drawing happened, not a single number matched. Her husband smirked, pocketed his $1,000, and cheerfully suggested she consult the dark spirits on how she was supposed to afford the grocery bill that week. 38. Never challenge a preteen to a digital game on their absolute home turf. A grown man was getting entirely too cocky at a family gathering and put his prized, mint-condition collection of vintage Transformers on the line. He boldly claimed he could absolutely destroy his 12-year-old niece in a virtual reality dance-off on her brand-new gaming console. While he completely tore a hamstring trying to do the Running Man, she executed perfect, lightning-fast digital choreography without even breaking a sweat. He lost so spectacularly that the little girl genuinely paused the game to ask if his legs were medically broken. 39. A husband, tired of losing petty arguments, bet his wife $100 he could easily beat a mail-order polygraph machine. He confidently hooked his fingers to the sensors, expecting standard baseline questions about the weather. Instead, she immediately asked what actually happened to her mother's expensive antique vase 5 years ago. The machine spiked so violently, the needle practically broke. He instantly lost the wager, was forced to buy a costly replica vase, and spent 2 miserable weeks sleeping on a remarkably uncomfortable living room sofa. 40. Social media clout is a highly toxic drug that forces people to do incredibly reckless things. A couple of guys bet to see who could harvest the absolute most digital likes on a single post within 24 hours, with the loser doomed to do the winner's dirty laundry for a year. One guy went nuclear and staged a completely fake, incredibly romantic marriage proposal to his girlfriend. The post exploded with thousands of likes and heavy congratulations from extended family. He won the bet easily, but then had to sit his very excited girlfriend down and explain the ring was cheap plastic for an internet joke. 41. Drone technology is truly amazing, but it simply cannot correct human stupidity. A guy named Leo bet his roommate a full month's rent that he was a skilled enough pilot to fly a cold can of beer from their balcony directly across the courtyard to a buddy's apartment using a commercial drone. He rigged up a little harness and took off into the sky. Unfortunately, Leo utterly failed to calculate the physics of a rogue gust of wind. The breeze caught the heavy payload, violently altered the flight path, and sent the drone crashing straight through the apartment manager's second-story glass window. 42. Rural boredom leads to some incredibly unique and highly painful wagers. An amateur farmer down in Georgia looked at his absolutely massive prize-winning pig named Big Dave and bet his neighbor a month's supply of fresh eggs that he could ride the animal like a horse across a 10-acre field. He hopped onto the massive swine's back like a professional rodeo cowboy. Big Dave paused, clearly insulted by the sheer audacity, tolerated his new passenger for about 15 feet, and then violently bucked sideways. The farmer went flying face-first into a giant puddle of slop, while Big Dave happily trotted off into the woods. 43. If you are walking around the Las Vegas Strip, never engage with a guy holding a deck of cards on the sidewalk. A tourist, extremely angry after dropping a ton of cash at the casino tables, thought he could win some pride back. He bet a random street magician his expensive wristwatch that he could easily figure out how a simple sleight-of-hand card trick was done. The tourist's guess was entirely wrong. Not only did the performer legally win the heavy gold watch, but as a final soul-crushing flourish of dominance, he reached behind the tourist's ear and pulled out the man's own rental car keys. 44. Betting a few bucks on a football game is totally normal, but this guy took it to an apocalyptic financial level. He was so undeniably convinced that a terrible local sports team was going to lose their matchup that he wagered the legal title of his actual automobile against his buddy's season tickets. It seemed like an absolute lock, right until the final 4 seconds of the fourth quarter. The underdog team pulled off a miraculous Hail Mary play that completely defied all statistical probability. He literally had to stand on the sidewalk and watch his friend drive away in his car to go celebrate. 45. The vast ocean demands deep respect, especially when there is an ego-driven wager on the line. Two guys fishing off the coast of Florida made a harsh bet. Whoever caught the smallest fish that day had to spend the evening gutting and cleaning the entire boat's catch. One guy finally hooked into an absolute monster of a grouper. He reeled it to the surface, but he got so incredibly cocky and celebrated so aggressively that he tripped over an ice cooler and tumbled headfirst into the salty water. His buddy had to spend 20 minutes hauling a soaking wet grown man back into the vessel. 46. Cheap landlords are an absolute menace to society, and this one learned a terribly expensive lesson in plumbing. Tired of endless phone calls about cold water, a building owner bet his angry tenants a free month of rent that he could fix the ancient rattling basement boiler entirely by himself. He marched downstairs with a heavy steel sledgehammer, fully believing in the raw power of percussive maintenance. He gave the rusty machine one massive whack. The boiler completely shattered, and the impact snapped the main water line in half, instantly flooding the basement with icy city water. He lost the rent money and destroyed his building. 47. You absolutely cannot negotiate with the gravitational pull of the moon, no matter how much confidence you have. A dad at the beach bet his young son $50 that his architectural genius could construct a sandcastle strong enough to easily withstand the incoming ocean tide. He spent 4 back-breaking hours digging deep moats, patting down massive reinforced walls, and building a genuinely impressive sandy fortress. Then, the Atlantic Ocean arrived. The very first moderate wave rolled up the shoreline and instantly dissolved the entire structure into a flat, wet puddle of mud in less than 30 seconds. He lost to basic marine science. 48. Some guys genuinely believe they possess the primal, unfiltered navigation skills of ancient wilderness explorers. An overly confident hiker in Utah arrogantly told his friends to put their phones away, betting them he could easily lead the group on a 10-mile desert trail using absolutely nothing but the position of the blazing sun. 6 brutally hot, terrifying hours later, the entire group was hopelessly lost, severely dehydrated, and nearly 3 miles in the wrong direction. They were finally rescued by a very annoyed state park ranger who, ironically enough, pinpointed their exact location using a highly advanced satellite GPS tablet. 49. An overly confident suburban dad bet his neighbors he could survive an entire long weekend camping in his own backyard, completely off the grid, eating only what he could manually forage. By Saturday afternoon, his primal survival instincts truly kicked in, and he was caught aggressively raiding a neighbor's plastic trash can for half-eaten hot dog buns. The neighborhood association not only heavily fined him for the ridiculous mess, but he had to buy premium steaks for the entire block just to stop the merciless, endless mocking. 50. Texans take their chili recipes incredibly seriously, sometimes to the absolute point of chemical warfare. One man, insufferably proud of his heavy beef recipe, bet his culinary rival that the loser of the annual town cook-off would have to prominently display the winner's ugly plastic trophy in their living room. Desperate to ensure victory, he secretly chopped up 3 entire, highly illegal ghost peppers into his pot to create a 5-alarm masterpiece. The chili was so aggressively spicy that the judges started coughing after merely inhaling the steam, and they instantly disqualified him. The winner was a sweet grandmother who submitted a completely bean-free recipe. Half of you are probably thinking, I could have won that. No, you couldn't. You'd be the guy paying $1,000 for eating a bad steak. Prove me wrong in the comments. What's a completely ridiculous bet you are absolutely sure you would win right now? Drop a like if you survived this much stupidity, and subscribe so I can keep heavily judging other people's life choices.